Welcome on in, everybody. Grab a seat because today I'll be reviewing The Last Voyage of the Demeter, which I just finished watching its opening night last night. So another Dracula movie. I haven't seen one of these in years, and I mean, it's been years. I did just recently watch The Lost Boys just the other night, if that counts. That movie's a tad bit different though. Way more hairspray in that movie, but a really, really good 80s vampire movie if you haven't seen it. But let's get back to The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Now I'll give you kind of a little brief synopsis of the plot of the movie. Dracula's unholy presence dooms the crew of a merchant ship, Demeter, as it sails from Carpathia to London. Now I want to talk about some things I think the movie did well, and I want to start by talking about the intro to the movie. And kind of in a sense, they give you the ending to the movie right away in the beginning, which is a bold move, and I kind of like it. And then we transport 4 weeks earlier, and that's kind of where the meat of the story takes off from there. I also like this whole setting of where they're kind of docked and getting ready for the voyage. I think it looks good, and I think it's just an overall cool place to set the beginning of the movie. Also, a quick little shout out to Liam Cunningham's vocal cords, or just his voice, because anything this guy narrates is pretty damn good. Liam Cunningham, of course, you probably recognize as Davos from Game of Thrones, who was kind of the lead counselor for that batshit crazy guy, Stannis Baratheon. Another positive for me is I think it was a good story choice to add a kid on board of the ship. It kind of breaks up the variety of the characters and the personalities a little bit, instead of just having a bunch of smelly, ball-scratching crew members. And if slow burns aren't really your thing, then you're in luck, because this movie wastes no time just kind of throwing you right into some stuff that right away kind of makes you say, whoa, that was kind of a lot. Another positive for me is this movie's bold in a certain way. Now, I don't want to spoil too much, but there's a certain aspect of the movie you can clearly tell this movie gives zero fucks. This is something that most movies wouldn't touch or wouldn't do because they're afraid that it would turn off the audience. But nope, this movie does not care, and they just go ahead and do it. I also like the look of Dracula in this movie. They decided to go with this more brutal, gritty, scary, creepy version to the character, and I think it's really, really good, and there's definitely some certain sequences and shots in the movie that are pretty damn scary. Speaking of Dracula, I like the fact that we get a little bit of a backstory on the character midway through the movie as well. It's kind of this whole aspect. He's living in this dark castle, kind of overlooking this town and this country and kind of just tormenting them for many, many years. And now he's on this ship with a new plan. I like that whole aspect of the movie and that entire backstory. Next, I want to talk about the gore in the movie. And one of the early gore moments we do get, Dracula rips this guy's throat out, and then pieces of his throat and blood are like down on the deck, and he just gets down there and starts licking it and eating it on the floor like it's some kind of puppy chow. And then he goes and like full mounts the dude, and then you just hear this like sucking and crunching sound effects. It's pretty damn gory, and I like it. And just overall, there's some pretty good gore in this movie, and that's definitely a positive for me. Oh, and who knew that Dracula was one of the early trendsetters for displaying his victims? Michael Myers, all those years later, must have taken some notes. It also kind of made me laugh a little bit how the ending to the movie is like covered in this fog, and they're like, I can't really see anything. And the reason is because I just recently got done watching and making a video on John Carpenter's The Fog from 1980. By the way, great movie if you have not seen it. But I also went to the filming locations too, and that's going to be a part of the video as well. Really cool video, so be on the lookout for that. But anyway, it's just that whole fog atmosphere at the end of the movie. Just really enjoyed that. I also think the sound design in this movie is pretty badass. There's one moment in particular that stands out to me where there's blood dripping from on top of the boat onto somebody's white shirt. And as the blood drips are dripping onto the shirt, it goes boom, boom, boom. And it's just a really cool thing that definitely stood out to me. There's also some genuinely tense moments in this movie. One moment in particular where somebody's hiding in the captain's quarters and there's kind of a little bit of a chase sequence. There's some things coming out of the shadows, and just overall that scene was really, really creepy and definitely pretty damn intense. And damn, there's a couple moments in this movie where people are burning and it looks so good on screen that you're kind of sitting in your chair like, I kind of feel hot a little bit, but it's just like one of those tense moments where you're like, holy shit, this is really happening. Another positive that I want to talk about is just the overall setting for this movie. Most of the movie takes place in the middle of the ocean. It's dark. You're on a ship. It's isolated. It kind of reminds me of space in a way. You're on a ship in space. It's dark. There's not really any help anywhere nearby. It also reminds me of that famous Alien quote, "In space, no one can hear you scream." in the middle of the ocean, nobody can hear you scream, and it's just a really good setting for a scary movie. And the last positive that I want to mention is I like the very end of the movie where we get some shots in London. It's got some creepiness to it. It's also got kind of an ambiguous touch to it as well, which leaves open the potential for a sequel. And overall, just that ending to the very last part of the movie, I actually really like it. And next, I want to talk about some of the negatives in the movie to me. And first, I want to talk about Liam Cunningham's character, Captain Elliot. And how did he even become the captain? Like, as soon as something goes wrong on this ship, this guy is worthless. I wanted so much more from his character throughout the story. He's such a good actor, so I was just hoping to see so much more from his character. And his character was kind of just worthless and just didn't really do much for me. Really, the characters overall, outside of the woman on board of the ship who's a badass, all of the characters just weren't that great. Some of them were pretty annoying. There wasn't much charisma in the characters, and it wasn't the acting, it was more so just the way they were written. But overall, the characters to me were just kind of whatever. I also didn't love how the new guy on the ship was just kind of a dick to everybody right away. I know he comes from a very different background than most of the other people on the ship. He's educated, etc., but his character just wasn't really that likable for being a character that's such a big part of the story. And I mean, they're like 20 miles off the shore and already everybody hates the guy outside of the kid and the dog who kind of liked him. I see the new guy on the ship kind of like when you invite a work friend to a personal party that's outside of work with a new group of people. They're really cool at work, but you don't know how they are outside of work. And then when you take them to the party, they're just kind of immediately really weird and kind of a buzzkill. And right away, you're just like, oh shit, what did I do? And that's kind of like the new guy. There's one moment in this movie where they're all kind of like laughing and having a great time and talking about how they're going to spend their bonus money. And one guy's like, yeah, I'm going to go to a brothel and bang some chicks. And they're like, what about you, new guy? And the new guy's just like, well, I actually don't like money. I just want to see the goodness in the world. And all these like dirty blue collar, ball scratching crew members are like, who the fuck invited this guy? Another negative for me is they took way too long to finally search this ship. There had already been a bunch of weird shit happening. One guy even saw Dracula, and they didn't even decide to really like search the ship until it was too late. And another thing, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the gore in this movie, but from Dracula's perspective, doesn't it seem kind of counterintuitive? I mean, like, I love the fact that he's crushing somebody's head, but you've got these like perfect bags of blood that you want to eat and live off of, but you're just kind of like crushing their heads and wasting blood all over the place. I don't know, just from his perspective, just kind of seems a little bit weird to me. Also, just overall, there's one point in the movie where they've been at sea for 18 days. People have already died. Someone has literally already told you who is doing this, yet they haven't even really came up with any sort of a good plan at all to try to like keep themselves alive until they get to London or try to kill this thing. I mean, even at one point, it's very clear that this thing doesn't like the sunlight. So why aren't you just like barricading yourselves in the captain's quarters at night? And then during the day, you're going above deck when it's daylight. Just like, what are you doing? And the last negative that I want to mention is just the big fight scene towards the end of the movie, which didn't really make much sense to me, especially when you consider how this thing acted throughout the earlier parts of the movie. Earlier, this thing is very smart and tactical and really damn good at killing people, yet in the final fight scene, this thing is making stupid decisions, it's very vulnerable, and overall just does things that don't really make much sense when you consider the rest of the story. So that part of the movie just kind of felt a little bit off to me and didn't really make much sense. And here are my final thoughts on The Last Voyage of the Demeter. It's got some good kills in the movie, definitely some tense moments in the movie. Like I mentioned earlier, this movie also has stakes. Anyone can die at any time, trust me. But overall, the crew members' efforts in the movie were kind of lackluster to me, and really just the characters in general were kind of forgettable to me. Outside of Anna's character, I wish I would have seen more of her character. She was a badass. I really liked her a lot, but the characters were just kind of a letdown to me. I like the look of Dracula in this movie, but overall, this movie to me is a pretty good time. The rewatchability, though, is not really high for me. I don't really see myself going back and watching this movie. And overall, the movie was just kind of okay to me. But there you go. That is my review of The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, be on the lookout for new videos on the channel, which come out every single Friday. But I'm Matt McFarland, and thanks for watching. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already done so. Oh, and I have a Patreon as well if you didn't already know about that. I've got a lot of cool stuff over there. I've got commentary tracks that you can play alongside movies to feel like you're watching the movie with me. Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. I've got my first time ever watching A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original movie. A lot of cool stuff on the Patreon. Obviously not required at all, but just an additional way to help support this channel and help to keep these videos going. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.